Dr. Tatiana Stray here, and I want to ask you, should you go first in a negotiation? Well, recently I've been doing some negotiation training, and this was one of the questions that kept coming up in groups, in part because people are often under the assumption that you shouldn't go first, because if you disclose information, then you're somehow more vulnerable. You want the client or the counterpart to speak first because it might create a range for you to discuss. However, we have some interesting science to help you answer that question, and I'm going to tell you right now. Anytime I do any type of training, the general advice is you should go first, but there are some conditions. So first, let's chat about why you should go first. Well, the brain has these cognitive biases, one of which are called anchoring and adjustment. And basically that means that when a number gets thrown out, it becomes a reference point, and we can never adjust away from it too much. In the context of negotiation, the first number will be the anchor. Now, the person who speaks the anchor will often do it to their benefit, which means that if your counterpart speaks the anchor, it is in their benefit, and any type of adjustment that you'll do will always be in their personal benefit, not in yours. What's interesting about this bias is even if you know about it, you cannot remove yourself from it. So understanding you've been anchored is not a solution to the anchor itself. Psychologists and researchers that study this phenomenon also get anchored. So let me give you some examples of anchoring. In the context of sales, let's say the first number might be really big and then the second option is less. And even if it's an expensive one, you're like, well, it doesn't look that bad. So one example might be if you see a t-shirt for $200 and you're like, that's exorbitant. And then you see one for $90 and you're like, that's pretty good actually. The $90 t-shirt might still be really expensive. In the context of negotiation, it may be a salesperson throwing out a really high number and then you thinking you brought it down and got some extra side deals that is now to your benefit, but actually you've just solidified a higher price for that salesperson. So in a negotiation context, you actually want to set the anchor and you want to do it so it's a little bit higher so it can come down and make the other person feel good. Now, the conditions that have to be met for you to set an anchor is one, you have to be exceptionally informed about what the going rate for the market is. You cannot throw a number that's so outlandish because that risks the counterpart just walking away thinking that it's ridiculous. And two, you kind of have to speak to the value you bring. Now, what's interesting in the context of negotiation, you're now playing in the space of persuasion, and value, in a sense, is very subjective. We can bolster it by bringing in objective criteria, but the way you speak to it will ultimately sell or not the value that you bring to the table. So you need to make sure that when you present your price, you have 3 top reasons as to why that price is worth what it is. It's very important to not do more than 3 because ultimately you devalue your arguments. And what's also interesting is you have to have some reasons. And they've done fun research back in the day where they found that they had a secretary cut in line for printing. And they found that what was important, what allowed people to let this individual cut in line is when she said, because, right? Whatever the because was led to an increase in the individual being let to be cut in line. But when you did not have a because, most often it didn't let the secretary be cut in line. So the persuasive arguments of because are very important. And in the context of professional negotiations, pinning anything by numbers, saying industry ranges is a really great way to bolster your case. So from now on, you should always be going first in a negotiation, whether it's a job context, whether it's dealing with a client. And I know it might be a little bit uncomfortable if you're not used to it, but it's really just a matter of practicing your script and making sure you have valid reasons for why that price is worth what it's worth. So I would encourage you to try going first and see what kind of outcomes you can achieve.